All right, so we are diving deep today into a vanished nation, Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
We've got some excerpts here from a text called A Vanished Nation. And just looking through this, I am hooked already.
It's a fascinating story.
It is.
Really a fascinating case study. Not just, the how of Yugoslavia's collapse, but like the why. The echoes of this story are still felt today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with a story this complex? I mean, we're talking about, a nation formed from the wreckage of empires, riddled with ethnic tensions, ruled by this leader who defied Stalin himself.
Well, the text starts in kind of an unexpected place, Vienna, 1913.
Okay.
And it paints this picture of a young Joseph Broz, years before he becomes Tito, living a carefree life.
Really?
He's a locksmith by trade,
Okay.
but he spends his nights waltzing, wooing women. Even has a fling with a wealthy socialite.
Like Tito, the revolutionary.
All right.
It's kind of hard to picture him as like a carefree party animal.
Totally. But then, boom,
Uh-oh.
unexpected pregnancy. And suddenly, this frivolous life is thrown into turmoil.
Yeah.
Almost symbolic, don't you think?
Okay.
Is his personal life mirroring the greater political turmoil brewing in the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. You got this powder keg of ethnicities and national identities across Europe, all on the brink of World War I. And here's young Broz dealing with his own personal powder keg.
Exactly. And what's even more wild is who else is in Vienna at this time?
Okay.
We're talking Leon Trotsky, a key figure in the Russian Revolution, and even Joseph Jukashvili, who you might know better as Stalin.
No way. They were all in the same city.
Yeah.
It's like a historical meet cute.
Yeah.
But with like devastating consequences down the line.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The text even mentions a struggling artist by the name of Adolf Hitler, who was also trying to make a name for himself in Vienna at the time.
Whoa. Talk about a concentration of figures. Who would go on to shape the 20th century in profound ways?
In profound ways.
It makes you wonder. What if they had like bumped into each other at a cafe or something?
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
History is full of what ifs.
Yeah.
But for Broz, the path ahead was becoming pretty clear with this pregnancy, this looming threat of war. He makes a life-altering decision.
Okay, so he joins the army.
Yep.
He joins the army.
1914, he's sent to the Eastern Front.
Okay.
Probably thought it would be a quick stint, back to the waltzes in no time.
Right.
But then World War I explodes, and everything changes.
And of course, we know he ends up a prisoner of war in Russia. Is that where we see the transformation from Broz to Tito begin?
It's a pivotal moment for sure. The text really suggests that during his captivity, Broz is exposed to Marxist-Leninist ideas for the first time.
Okay.
And he sees in them a solution to the inequalities and injustices he'd witnessed.
So it's not just the hardship of the war,
Right.
but also this exposure to a new ideology.
Right.
That's starting to reshape his thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
He connects with this idea of empowering the working class, the common man. Remember, he came from humble beginnings himself. This was a guy who worked with his hands, understood the struggles of ordinary people.
Right, yeah. Okay, so we've got Broz, the former locksmith, now a prisoner of war, immersed in communist theory. But back home, the world is changing too, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire doesn't survive the war.
It crumbles.
Yeah.
Under the weight of this conflict. And from its ashes rises this new nation, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, later renamed the Kingdom of Yugoslavia.
The Kingdom of Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
So a brand new country, forged in the aftermath of war.
Right.
But a kingdom needs a king.
Right.
So who takes the throne?
Well, the first king is Peter I. He's a relatively moderate figure, favors a more decentralized system, giving the different ethnic groups within the kingdom a degree of autonomy.
Okay, so he's trying to like play it safe a little bit.
Yeah.
Considering the diversity of the region?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But then his son Alexander I takes over, and things take a different turn. Alexander I pushes for a more centralized, Serbian-dominated state.
Okay, so the seeds of ethnic tension are already being sown here.
Exactly.
This is not sounding good.
It wasn't Alexander I's policies alienated other groups within Yugoslavia, leading to increased resentment and unrest.
Right.
And in 1934, he's assassinated.
Assassinated by who?
A Bulgarian assassin, actually.
Wow.
And this act of violence becomes a real turning point. In Yugoslav history,
Right.
it creates this power vacuum. this sense of uncertainty and instability.
And this is where Broz, our locksmith turned revolutionary, steps onto the stage.
Not quite yet.
Oh, okay.
Remember, he's still working his way up the ranks of the Yugoslav Communist Party.
Right.
But there's another major player about to enter the scene, one who will inadvertently help Broz rise to power.
I think I know what you're talking about.
You got it.
Hitler.
Hitler, his shadow looms over everything in the 1930s.
It really does.
Yeah. And Hitler's aggressive expansionism, his invasion of Yugoslavia in 1941, becomes this catalyst for Broz's transformation into Tito, the leader we know him as.
Hold on. How does Hitler invading Yugoslavia help Broz?
Well, think about it.
Okay.
The invasion discredits the existing Yugoslav government, paints them as weak and collaborative.
Okay.
The people are looking for someone to resist, someone to rally behind.
Okay.
And that someone is Broz. He seizes the moment, takes on this mantle of leadership, and the rest, as they say, is history.
So he really becomes a symbol of defiance against the Nazis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But his journey from party official to wartime leader is anything but straightforward.
Okay.
It's a story of hardship, resilience, and this deep commitment to the people he sought to liberate.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. Tell me more about Tito's rise to power, his partisan forces, and how he navigates this incredibly complex and dangerous landscape.
Well, that's where things get really interesting. But first, I think we need to take a quick sip of water. And we'll dive into part 2 of this incredible story.
Sounds good to me.
So as Hitler's forces are sweeping across Europe, Tito emerges as this almost mythical figure, leading this resistance movement deep in the Yugoslav mountains.
You've got this relatively unknown communist leader facing down one of the most powerful armies the world had ever seen. What were his partisan forces like?
So imagine this. It's this ragtag group of fighters,
Okay.
armed with whatever they can scrounge up, using guerrilla tactics to harass and disrupt the Nazis,
Okay.
hit-and-run attacks, sabotage missions, anything they can do to like tie up German troops who were desperately needed elsewhere.
It sounds incredibly dangerous. Were they even remotely a match for the Wehrmacht?
Not in a conventional sense, no, but they had something that the Germans didn't, the support of the people,
Okay.
ordinary Yugoslavs, risking their lives to provide food and shelter, intelligence to the partisans.
Wow.
It was truly a people's war, like a testament to Tito's ability to inspire
Yeah.
and mobilize.
I can see how that would make a huge difference. But
Yeah.
still, this is World War II. A brutal, devastating conflict. They must have faced incredible hardship.
Absolutely. The text doesn't shy away from the grim reality of their struggle,
Right.
constantly on the move, evading capture, facing shortages of food and medicine, caring for thousands of refugees and wounded.
Wow. Well,
Yet they persevered.
it's like this David versus Goliath scenario, with Tito as this charismatic leader rallying his people against impossible odds.
Definitely a story of resilience and defiance.
Yeah.
And what's striking is that Tito, even in like the darkest moments, never wavered in his commitment to the people.
Okay.
He led from the front lines, shared their hardships, inspired them with his unwavering belief in the cause.
It's interesting to think about, those early years in Vienna? Broskog, the carefree youth,
Yeah.
enjoying waltzes and romances. It seems like a world away from the harsh realities of guerrilla warfare.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But, maybe those early experiences, the hardship he witnessed even before the war, shaped his empathy for the common man, his understanding of their struggles.
That's a great point. It's almost like his life had been leading up to this moment, preparing him for the role he was destined to play.
And what's remarkable is that he not only survives the war, but he leads Yugoslavia to victory.
Yeah.
He emerges as a national hero, a symbol of resistance, unifying force in this deeply divided country.
Okay, so the war is over. Tito is the undisputed leader of Yugoslavia. You'd think things would calm down a bit, right?
You would think so.
Wrong.
Wrong.
Because then he picks a fight with Stalin.
He does. And this is where Tito's truly independent spirit shines through.
Okay.
He refuses to simply become a pawn in Stalin's game.
Yeah.
He envisions a Yugoslavia that's socialist, yes,
Yeah.
but independent from Soviet control.
So this is the clash of the titans you were talking about. What
Yeah.
caused the rift between them?
It was a combination of factors: disagreements over economic policies, Yugoslavia's role in the communist bloc, even personal clashes. Tito saw Stalin's attempts to control Yugoslavia as a threat to its hard-won independence.
And Stalin wasn't exactly known for tolerating dissent.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
The relationship deteriorates rapidly. culminating in Yugoslavia's expulsion from the Cominform in 1948.
Okay.
A bold move by Tito.
Yeah.
A real declaration of independence that stunned the world.
I can only imagine Stalin's reaction to this.
Oh, I'm sure he was furious.
Yeah.
It was a huge blow to his authority.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop there.
Yeah.
Stalin imposed an economic blockade on Yugoslavia,
Okay.
hoping to cripple its economy and force Tito into submission.
This is intense. So how does Tito manage to survive this pressure from, like, the most powerful man in the communist world?
He plays a brilliant strategic game.
Okay.
He turns to the West for support.
The West.
Yeah. Securing economic aid and even military assistance from the U.S. and its allies.
Wait, so the U.S. is helping a communist country?
It really highlights the complexities of the Cold War.
Yeah.
You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, as they say. The U.S. saw Tito's defiance of Stalin as this valuable crack in the Soviet bloc.
Okay.
And they were willing to support him, at least to some extent.
So Yugoslavia becomes this unique entity, socialist nation, but independent from both the Soviet and the Western blocs. How does that even work?
It was a delicate balancing act, for sure.
Yeah.
Tito walked this tightrope between East and West, forging his own path.
Yeah.
And within Yugoslavia itself, he created this unique system of governance, self-managing socialism.
That's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot. But I'm not sure I fully understand it. What did it actually mean for the people living in Yugoslavia?
Well, imagine a system where workers had more control over their workplaces,
Okay.
greater emphasis on decentralization, local decision-making, an attempt to create a more equitable form of socialism, one that empowered the people rather than concentrating power in the hands of the state.
Sounds pretty radical, especially for that time period. Did it work?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
During Tito's lifetime, Yugoslavia experienced a period of relative stability and economic growth.
Okay.
But the system also had its flaws, and its long-term viability was always in question.
So this socialist experiment, this defiance of Stalin, this balancing act between East and West, it all seems to hinge on Tito's leadership. What happens when he's gone?
That is the crux of the matter, and what we're going to explore next.
Okay.
Because the cracks in this carefully constructed system start to widen after Tito's death in 1980.
Okay, so the stage is set for Yugoslavia's unraveling. I'm really eager to hear how the story unfolds. What were the forces at play? What role did the international community play? And most importantly, what can we learn from this vanished nation?
Well, let's delve into that right now, as we continue our deep dive into a vanished nation.
So we left off with Tito at the end of his life in 1980. And Yugoslavia's future, very uncertain.
Right.
What happens next? What sends this nation spiraling towards collapse?
Well, to understand that, we have to remember, Yugoslavia wasn't one big happy nation. You had 6 republics each with their own distinct history and culture, often simmering resentments.
So Tito's self-managing socialism, while innovative, was a very complex system that relied heavily on his personal authority to hold it all together. So with him gone, those cracks start to show.
Exactly. And economically, things start to unravel.
Okay.
The oil crisis of the 70s hit Yugoslavia hard, leaving it with a massive debt burden. And on top of that, remember, the system Tito created emphasized decentralization.
Right.
So you have republics competing for resources, each feeling like they're getting the short end of the stick.
So these economic disparities between the republics, combined with those long-standing ethnic tensions, create this really volatile mix.
Yeah, it's like removing the keystone from an arch. The whole structure starts to crumble.
Yeah, and then you also have the rise of these nationalist leaders, figures like Slobodan Milošević in Serbia and Franjo Tuđman in Croatia.
Right,
Yeah.
they exploit these anxieties, these historical grievances, and use them to fuel their own political agendas.
Classic tactic divide and conquer, right?
Pretty much.
Preying on people's fears and insecurities
Turning them
against each other.
Exactly.
But how does this political posturing translate into actual conflict?
Well, it starts with declarations of independence. Slovenia and Croatia are the first to break away in 1991.
Okay.
And then Macedonia follows suit. But things get really ugly in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Because of its diverse ethnic makeup.
Exactly. You have Bosniaks, Serbs, and Croats all living within the same borders, each group with their own aspirations.
Right.
And the war in Bosnia becomes this horrific example of ethnic cleansing, with atrocities committed on all sides.
It's a dark chapter.
Yeah.
Marked by events like the Srebrenica massacre.
Right.
Which, I mean, really shocked the world's conscience.
It did.
It's hard to believe that something so brutal could happen in Europe just a few decades ago.
I know.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile peace can be, how quickly things can spiral out of control when you have these deep-seated divisions.
Absolutely.
It didn't end with Bosnia.
No, the conflict in Kosovo, with its Albanian majority seeking independence from Serbia, that further fractured the region. It drew in NATO intervention, led to more bloodshed.
So by the mid-1990s, Tito's Yugoslavia is gone, shattered into multiple independent states, each grappling with the legacy of war and the challenge of rebuilding.
Yeah, it's a tragic end to what was once a promising experiment in socialist self-governance.
It really is. And what makes it even more tragic is that it didn't have to end this way.
Right. There were missed opportunities, failures of leadership, both within Yugoslavia and on the international stage.
You know, going back to the text of Vanished Nation, it really emphasizes the human cost of this conflict. It's not just about political maneuvering or military campaigns. It's about millions of lives shattered, families torn apart, the enduring trauma that still haunts that region.
That's what makes history so compelling, yet so heartbreaking. You know, behind those grand narratives, the geopolitical chess moves are real people living their lives, trying to make sense of the world. And sometimes those worlds collide in ways that are just devastating and irreversible.
I think that's a really important takeaway from this deep dive. We can analyze all the political factors, the economic pressures, the historical context, but ultimately it's those human stories that stay with you. The individual lives lost, the dreams shattered, the potential futures extinguished.
It's important to remember that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to learn from the past, to understand the mistakes that were made, so we can hopefully avoid repeating them in the future.
Absolutely. Yugoslavia's story, while unique in its specifics, holds universal lessons about the dangers of nationalism, the fragility of peace, and the importance of addressing grievances before they escalate into violence.
It's a cautionary tale, but also a story of resilience. You know, the human spirit's ability to endure, to rebuild, to seek reconciliation, even in the face of unimaginable loss.
Well said. Well, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into A Vanished Nation.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from Tito's carefree days in Vienna to the tragic disintegration of the country he built.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
And I hope it's left our listeners with a deeper understanding of this complex, an often misunderstood chapter of history.
I hope so, too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.